This video will include spoilers for Boktai in your hand, considering that Boktai 2 is obviously a direct sequel, so story modes from that game will need to be brought up. So, you have been warned now that there will be spoilers for the first game. Now check out Boktai 1, go check it out. There's also a video on the channel as well, talking about Boktai 1. Either way, here we go, talking about Boktai 2 Solar Boy Django. Boktai 2 Solar Boy Django came out in 2004, except for Europe where it came out in 2005. And this game does make a whole lot of changes to the formula we got going around. Where Boktai 1 was more typically an action stealth game of puzzles, here it's more so an action RPG stealth game with puzzles, and we'll get more into that when we get to the gameplay portion, but that's the big major difference when it comes to Boktai 2 specifically. The premise is that Django is headed back to his hometown of San Miguel, and on the way there, gets attacked by a vampire who manages to steal the Gundel soul from him, which should be not much of an issue considering vampires can't use the solar gun. Oh no. So the situation is more dire than it seems, considering we not only no longer have our trusty weapon that helps us purify the vampires, but a vampire is able to use the Gundel soul, which is very bad. But on top of the vampire bringing around the solar gun, there are also immortals who are trying to cause the prophesized doomsday, which is the big lingering threat the characters are worried about that doomsday will happen, especially since San Miguel has no pretty much solar tree to protect it, so it is very vulnerable to the undead trying to come in, with Zaziel trying her best to prevent that from happening with her magic, but only so much she can do against the undead, so it's also a race against trying to stop the undead from causing doomsday. Something I also find interesting is the fact that there are now also segments where Django will have internal monologues, but also flat out talk, so he's no longer a silent protagonist unlike the first game. So there are points where Django will speak out and speak his mind, which once again is a big difference when it comes to the more emphasis on the narrative compared to the first game. But after wandering about a bit, Django does run into Zaziel, who helps out Django by giving him the Soul Device. The Soul Device, or Solar Glove, allows him to use elemental magic, equivalent to the power of the sun. So this game, instead of focusing on using a solar gun and long-range weapon, you instead mostly have short-range weapons, in this case being a sword, a spear, and a hammer. Also your fist, but I don't think your fist ever actually does anything to an enemy. So it's more about getting close up and personal enemies, or using the Soul Device to augment your ability with the elements. As mentioned before, this game is a shift to an action RPG, with you getting experience points and leveling up Django, and getting stat points that you can then allocate to your different stats. On top of the fact, the weapons also have their own stats, some kind of special abilities as well, and Django has a skill proficiency when it comes to these weapons. So there are multiple ways to pretty much upgrade Django, though I will say what they make sure of God, please keep your weapon, at least your main weapon you're going to use, updated for a level God. Don't make the mistake I did where late in the game, I was wondering why Django was doing so pitiful damage, and it's because the weapons weren't that upgraded, and because of the fact that the Solar Forge, which is such a weird way of handling upgrading, because let's just say sometimes I feel like I get upgraded, sometimes I feel like I got a side grade, which is for the most part, so I felt like I wasn't sure I was getting anything out of it, but no, there was ways to get it. There's also the fact that the weapons you get is also technically handicapped by Django's level, as you can't get weapons that are more powerful than him. So please keep your weapons updated to the level you're currently at, so don't make the mistake I did and try and fight bosses doing chip damage to them before I realized the mistake I was doing. A change to the power driver sequence is that now the immortal soul will try and come at a Coffin in order to stop the power drivers, but also do an attack to stop you. So now it's more about using your melee weapons to bounce their soul back into the Coffin, with the fact that they cannot be finished off unless their soul is in the Coffin. So instead of having the first game where they start corrupting the solar rays, it is instead them just flat out stopping the power drivers themselves with their spirit and gotta knock them back in. which honestly this changed the mechanic thanks to melee weapons. I actually do like. It actually has the Immortals have way more of a chance to fight back as opposed to our first game, where it honestly felt so hilariously one-sided in the player's favor. So this change to the power driver sequence is great, although I don't like the fact that you have to always bring the Coffin back to the freaking screen next to San Miguel, because it means you're going to batch the same locales over and over. I most preferred the first game, where this power driver sequence was just happen right in front of the dungeon, especially since the first game did have a segment where they take advantage of the fact of, oh, Elven Immortal just blocks out the sunlight, which this game does not do, sadly. With dragging them out, it's pretty straightforward dragging them out to the power driver near San Miguel. Another change to the formula is the hub town of San Miguel, where you have several shops to go through, and unlike the first game where there are only about a few characters that join your adventure, here you get a whole entourage of characters who help you out in the adventure with their shops and also side quests, which is a very cool addition to add to this game, and also really adds more to the roster of the characters, because the first game only really had Django, Otenko, Lita, and Sabata, and then the rest of them, everyone else is just pretty much the Immortals you face, who had their own banter help with the plot, but you didn't really have many characters to really bounce around with the story. Well, here we got plenty of characters with their own deal. It's also Solid Snake you can get. Don't be confused with the fact that he's labeled as question mark. That is supposed to be Solid Snake, in reference to the Metal Gear franchise, also by Kojima. And the fact that the predicament he's found himself in is also a fun Easter egg to Metal Gear 1, so that's also a very fun way of introducing the character as an Easter egg for this project. Overall, when it comes to a narrative of this game, I definitely say it's better than the first game, just for the fact that there's more involved, more characters going on, and there's more twists and turns to the narrative this time around, which, like I said, is not anything super crazy you won't see coming, but it just really helps the game, it just really helps out, and it's just super cool, especially with the directions they go with this game. Another gameplay change is the fact that the first game had a bunch of side dungeons on top of the main ones. Well, here, there's way fewer dungeons in general, but they're all way grander as a result, with a lot more going on, a lot more puzzles, a lot more stuff to get, a lot more optional goodies, and honestly, it's a mixed bag, because while it does remove the kind of bloat the first game had with so many different optional dungeons for stuff, here, while the dungeons are grander, they also kind of get more annoying. Like, it's more just the fact that they feel like they go on longer than they should, so it ends up feeling pretty bleh, especially since this game's go-to method for puzzles is box puzzles, where yes, the first game had them, but also had different kind of puzzles as well, which you had fun interaction with the enemies because of the solar gun. But here, because you don't have the gun no soul, you said to have melee attacks, so they can't replicate that. So their go-to thing is constantly using boxes, even points where you freaking use a soul device to just manipulate the properties of special boxes to do more box puzzles, and the boxes, I didn't think I'd be sitting here going, just give me the math puzzles, just give me the math puzzles, because so many box puzzles, and that's a personal thing, I know it's a me thing, but I just freaking hate slide puzzles with a burning passion, because I overthink them, and then I fail them, and I gotta redo them. I will say, the rooms these puzzles are in are smaller, so they are way easier to restart, although there was one instance where I accidentally soft-locked the game because I got stuck in a room that I couldn't reload without literally reloading the entire game itself. But the save system was improved, so there is that. But like I said, the dungeons are grander and have more going on and are more an adventure, but they can feel like they go on for longer than they need to, specifically. Especially when the puzzles do feel repetitive with so many box puzzles. I will now have a small little spoiler warning for Boktai 2, going to really go over all the additions to this game. I have to also talk about some spoiler scenarios, what happens to the game, so I'll put a timestamp so you can set the spoiler, but you've been warned. Right now, let's go. 3, 2, 1. At a certain point, Django gets turned to a vampire, which completely removes your ability to use the power of the sun, which also includes the soul device you got in this game, meaning Vampire Django, or let's call him Black Django, let's call him Vampire Django. He is unable to use a soul device and instead rely on the power of darkness, whether it be the ability to buff yourself with darkness, the ability to go into a coffin to restore energy at a very slow and pitiful rate. You're probably better off burning up in the sun just to recover freaking energy. Or the fact that you're able to do stuff like turn into a wolf, which is a super cool combat ability, although it only works if you can do it from behind an enemy. Being able to turn into a mouse or a bat, which solely exists for little puzzle scenarios, but they don't really do anything that crazy with them. It's like, oh, here's a small hole for a mouse, go in there. Oh, here's clearly a hole for a bat, go in there, because even the bat is susceptible to stuff like ice physics, making the one-time point of animation of flying in the air completely pointless if basically it's the equivalent of Django still on the ground entirely. But overall, when it comes to the power of darkness get from being a vampire, it leaves a lot to be desired, because honestly, the vampire abilities are just bleh, on top of the fact that because it's more something added to the menu, it makes the menu even more. So it is a lame addition overall, even though it's such a cool idea and aspect to include to this game. But Vampire Django, the only real benefit is the fact that he is way more proficient at using the melee weapons. So you want someone to use melee weapons, but again, without the soul device buffing the element, you can use Vampire Django. But if you still want elemental affinity added onto it, it's not darkness, you're out of luck when it comes to Vampire Django because you can't use a soul device. Now, the handicap to Vampire Django is the fact that he also can't eat the solar fruits. Trying to eat those once I give a stomach ache, which completely messes with the screen. So he's had to rely on either potions that don't do as much as solar nuts, or tomato juice, which are basically the equivalent of eating some solar fruit. So there is that alternative, but just the fact that you now need separate inventory items for Vampire Django to heal himself compared to regular Django, who he would get a stomach ache if he drank tomato juice. I should tomato juice give Django a stomach ache. I don't get that. Overall, when it comes to the additions to this game, it just can feel like it's trying to be grander, trying to be bigger in the first game, trying to do so much more, but honestly feels like it hasn't really properly implemented the ideas, especially the soul device, which because you can only equip 4 elements via the little shortcut bar, it means to constantly go into the menu and switch out stuff with my different abilities, which gets annoying fast, because honestly, this wasn't an issue in the first game when it came to the solar gun, despite the fact that it had different modes and frames. Like, what you had to set up for a dungeon, you generally had it set up, but here, it's a constantly swap back and forth, especially if some puzzles, like some blocks, need to change elements in order to manipulate a block. So, it just feels a lot more busy, but honestly feels like I'm basically doing the same stuff I did in the first game, but now I'm just taking longer to do it, which feels pretty bleh, unfortunately. Like I said, it feels like it's trying to be grander, trying to build and add more, but the more isn't fleshed out, which, well, it can be cool in some aspects, like, oh, an action RPG. It can also be lame because, oh, action RPG, where now the stats really matter, maybe you can go into dungeons and boss fights completely underpowered and just get obliterated, which isn't exactly the most fun aspect, but there are ways to circumvent it. Speaking of ways to circumvent it, Soul is now a currency. Yes, solar energy, which first game was only pretty much used when it comes to the one-time idea of, oh, we're grabbing solar energy from the bank or putting it in the bank, getting dark loans, is now effectively currency, which means you need to gather up soul in order to buy stuff from the people in San Miguel, which means in order to upgrade your armor and weapons, you better be stuck up on money. Which becomes an issue because another change to this game is that dying now needs you to spend soul in order to revive yourself, when in the first game it was free to do, but I gotta pay the dark loans. And the dark loans will be coming for that payment, so you better have that money ready in the solar bank when the time comes. So dying a lot will rack up your bill, which will take away from your ability in order to buy stuff from the shops. Now, I will say when it comes to buying stuff, don't bother buying healing items. You're better off just getting them from the dungeons, since they always respawn when you leave the dungeon. So there's stuff like that you can do. Instead, just focus on your equipment, especially your weapons, because you want your weapons to be up to date, just dealing good damage to the bosses. So taking soul into a currency just feels weird, especially since the interest rate from the soul bank is way lesser here than the first game. So trying to get money prepared unless you're actively grinding for it can feel weird. Can be pretty weird. I guess try to make the incentive using the dark loan more like a aspect you should do, but also the fact that the dark loan only gives you energy towards your solar energy and not towards an actual like bank loan. So there's no real reason to use the dark loans at all, especially since now you have all your energy as one big meter, as opposed to the first game where the solar gun had different batteries. So it's weird. Like, they want to have more incentive to use the dark loans, but then give you every reason still not to do it. It's just better off not using it and dealing with the pain of just trying to grind money and everything and just casually charging up, since, you know, since you have a way more precise and controlled overworld map in this game, it's way easier to just recharge your energy casually. So I don't know what's going on with this. Soul being energy to me of currency, it's just a weird addition. It's just a weird choice. It kind of doesn't even work. Who cares how it works? Something interesting is that this game also has 2 bad endings you can get depending on certain things you do in the game, which is an interesting decision to add into this game. But the game's main ending also has variance from how many times you defeat the final boss, where you get a different epilogue for each time, which is once again a cool addition, highlighting the bigger focus on the narrative this time around and having more bigger cast, which is a cool addition. Now, the first game had puzzle sections that required you to mess around with the solar sensor for puzzles, but here there's one dungeon where that's cranked up to the max, because you're gonna constantly be shifting in and out of sunlight for the entire dungeon in order to handle what's going on with the dungeon, which once again is a cool thing, but can become annoying if it's done back to back to back, and it constantly be like, can you be the sunlight for this? Okay, add the sunlight, in the sunlight, add the sunlight, over and over for this whole entire thing. It's mostly localized in one dungeon, but it does feel constantly weird and kind of feel the equivalent of the issue of, oh, needing to constantly filter my menu to change what's equipped in a soul device and stuff like that. So certain moments like that where they feel like they overuse the idea of needing to hide in the shade in order to progress through a section and everything, so that can be a bit annoying. There is also a post-game quest where you obtain a PET and need to assist Mega Man.exe, because Boktai 2 is the beginning of the crossovers between Boktai and Mega Man Battle series, with there being a cool battle minigame if you have playing against someone who has Mega Man Battle 5, and it's a cool addition. Made a video of video game crossovers that highlighted, because it is still one of the coolest ever crossover ideas in a video game and how it's handled, and I wish more people talked about it, but you do have that to look forward to as a post-game quest after being in the game, and it's a cool addition to include. There are also rewards for single player you get if you accumulate points from doing the battle minigame with someone who has Battle 5. Although good luck doing that nowadays, although that'd probably be easier with, you know, emulation and probably find people somewhere on the internet. There's people out there who want to play Boktai and Battle 5. Actually, considering the Battle Lexi collection, may not want to play Battle 5 on emulation, but they will for Boktai. So it's just a cool addition, one of the coolest crossover aspects, not the coolest crossover in a video game period. That is a cool bonus for this game. Overall, I still like Boktai 2 Solar Boy Django. I'm just kind of in a weird state where clearly I came in here thinking I remembered that, oh, Boktai 2 was better than Boktai 1, but replaying this game made me go like, nah, Boktai 1 more simpler design and having the RPG aspects actually benefited it more, on top of the dungeons being smaller in scope but having many more optional dungeons being a way better choice of everything. So I feel like I still prefer the first game more, especially playing around with the gun no soul. While here, the melee weapons, honestly, are just kind of, it just makes me wish I had the gun no soul, which I guess kind of at the point because it's getting taken away from you earlier in the game. But, you know, I kind of feel like my weapons are inefficient, especially since you gotta keep up to date with forging new weapons in order to make sure your damage is still doing good. So there's a whole entire aspect where I just feel like at points I was doing something wrong. I was doing something wrong, but now I need to get the money in order to upgrade my weapons. Then I need to get the money in order to pay off my dark loans because I keep dying so many times in this game. Because, to mention, the inventory in this game also got reduced. Like before, you can basically carry a hilarious amount of items because they stack with each other. Well, here you have a limited inventory, and each item takes one spot in inventory. So they are trying to balance the game on the fact that you have limited inventory, which is a cool addition trying to balance things out, but it does highlight the fact that I end up dying more because I have proper equipment, so boss fights taking so long when it takes so long because I'm not properly equipped, and that causes me to then not be able to outdamage the boss and end up dying in the process. Although I do like the fact that when you do game over, the game does give you tips on how to fight enemies or bosses, so there's that. Also, the trap rooms for the first game got heavily reduced. Since this game doesn't grade you anymore, you get title for being in the game with a code, which you, like Boktai 1, you can carry to the next game, but there's no grading system, so the traps are way lesser since they're just more specific little challenge battles, although a bunch of them are just defeat the enemy, which once again feels like a step back from the first game, where I can do this stuff, like enemies stealthily, or get enemies on a button, stuff like that. But here, no, it feels less creative with the trap room. So just had to also take a step back. Like overall, it tries to be grander, tries to be bigger, but it buckles in some aspects when it comes to the weight of trying to make this a way more grander adventure. But overall, still a good title and everything, and I'm still glad I replayed it. So that's all I gotta say about Boktai 2 Solar Boy Django. That is all. And the Mega Man crossover is still the coolest crossover in video game history, and no one can argue against me on this one. That is all.